Hey there, good morning, and welcome to Prog Monster. My name is Murph. I am the host of this show. This is a show that's dedicated to progressive rock and other forms of rock music. So today, it's part of my series that I've been doing, my ongoing series, which is progressive rock albums from the 1980s. This will be day 5, December 5th, episode number 5, of course. So, the group that I chose to do today was Saga. Now, Saga, I originally had chosen another album called Silent Night, but because of maybe I should just explain a bit. So what we're doing here is I'm picking one album per group for this entire month. So 31 albums, 31 days in December, 31 groups. And I choose an album from each group, one per group, because I don't want to give too much attention to any particular one. And then I'm just going to talk about the album. So one of the factors here is that I can't have heard anything from the album before. You know, I actually thought that maybe if I heard one song briefly or something like that before and would recognize it, I would probably leave it. In the case of the group I'm doing today, Saga, the album I had originally chose, Silent Night, had one track on it, the very opening track, that I was very familiar with. So at first I was still going to go through with it, and then I decided, no, I'm going to stick with my guns here and disqualify the album. So I did. So I went back into their discography and looked at what albums were available for the 1980s. And there was about 4, maybe there was 5, I don't know. But every single one of them had at least one track that I was familiar with or knew fairly well. There's about 3 or 4 songs by Saga that I used to have on my cassettes in the day that I played all the time that I liked. And I thought this is a pretty strong band, but I never got into them. So anyways, and then I found an album in 1987. They had moved to a different record label. A couple of the originals had left, and the band put out this album, which was promoted very well in the States, and, you know, great production and everything, and the album was supposed to come out. I mean, it never really did anything. It fell flat, but I like to give albums a chance, right? I don't like to just listen to what the masses want. So I picked this album. It's called Wildest Dreams from 1987. 8 tracks in total on here. So the first couple of things about the album that I wanted to discuss was the first thing is the production is very good. It's off the charts, good production, really clean sound. Everything is really well produced. You can see it. You know, this gets to the point where production crosses a line, I think. I go back, the album I like to example here is the production on Black Sabbath's Born Again album is murky and not really good, and the sound is terrible, but the album is absolutely a knockout. And, you know, sometimes production is needed to fix and really clean up something and make something that's really good stand out. But if you don't have the material there, it just makes what stands out is that the material stands out as being not very good. You know, so sometimes people put too much into their production and not enough into the material. And to me, that may be the case here with this album, Wildest Dreams. So I had a little bit of anticipation about what I might find, and it wasn't even up to the expectations that I had, and they weren't grandiose. I didn't think this was going to knock it out of the park. I thought, you know, that it could probably be a solid album. So it had, like I said, 8 tracks. The vocalist has the same one who was with them in all their other hits. So I thought, okay, that's good, because he was a strong part of that. And some of the songs that I liked from them in the past, and I didn't have any of their albums, I just had 3 or 4 tracks that I liked a lot. The Flyer being the big one. Liked that song a lot. But I don't think that was recaptured here on this album. And I just think it's a bit overproduced and pretty much an unmemorable album overall. The other thing that kind of turns me off a bit with this album is there's a couple of tracks, maybe 3 of them, Only Time Will Tell and Wildest Dreams and The Way of the World, that are track titles from other groups as well. The Only Time Will Tell and The Wildest Dreams, that's from the Asia album. They had a couple tracks on their albums called that, and this album actually mirrors a lot of that. The songs aren't exactly the same. There's nothing identical about these 2 songs to those songs. It's just the titles and the polishedness. Album is polished, overproduced, I think, and just it sounds like an 80s album. It's dated, and it has that kind of commercial sounding thing that why the 1980s aren't one of my favorite decades for music, is because of albums like this that were overproduced and polished. You know, you can look through a lot of bands and find this particular one, I think, is just a poster boy for that kind of thing. So anyways, I don't mean to be overly crapping on this album or negative about it, but I'm just telling what I see, right? Okay, so the first track, Don't Put on the Fire, is probably my favorite track on the album, and I'm not sure if it's because I think it's the best track or I like it the most, or because I hadn't gotten far enough into the album where it started to wear on me a bit. I'm not sure. It has some great vocals on it and some very pretty strong guitar on this song. So if you like this kind of production and this sound, or if you've had an experience with Saga, you will like this album, because it's a lot of what they had. It doesn't have that big soaring hit that some of the albums had, but it certainly has that same sound part to it. Only Time Will Tell, nice guitar solo on this. It sounds really polished, of course, and the backing vocals are not bad. Like, this one of the songs that I remember the backing vocals being pretty decent on. Wildest Dreams, which is the other song, that title came from Asia as well. Interesting. Well, I don't know if the group chose those titles because of Asia, but they do have those both in common. So has a nice guitar solo, it's pretty strong, and some interesting keyboard sounds to open the album, open this song. Some more great vocals, and guitar fills and drums are pretty strong on this song. I want to make it clear that the vocalist is really good, and I think he suits the group, but he fits into that polished sound very, very, very well. Chase the Wind's the next song. Some strong guitars, drums are okay. The drums are a little more frontal in this particular track than some of the other tracks. I've noticed the drums a lot more here. The back half, now that's the front half of the album, and it actually might have been on CD. I don't think so though. CDs came out in '88, so this was probably a vinyl originally and then transposed onto a CD. So the back half of the album, or the B side of the album, is completely, to me, unmemorable. The first track on the second side, We've Been Here Before. Yeah, we have but some good guitars. This may be the best track on the back half. The Way of the World, there's a song by Cheap Trick called The Way of the World. So that actually strengthened them, because that put a positive spin for me on this album, because I was thinking about that one. I like the opening, and the guitar on this riff is pretty cool as well. Angel, it's a ballad, or a ballad-like. So from a progressive rock point, doesn't fly with me. Ballads on progressive rock albums never fly. So right away, this album is hurting because of that. And even though it's a progressive rock album, or it has progressive elements, is probably a better term, it is also very commercial sounding, very polished, and a ballad just adds to that. So Guitar solo is not bad though in this song, and the guitars are actually strong on this album. I think the guy who does the guitar solos, I'm not sure who it is. I know there's the Crichton brothers and Sadler that's on this album. Other than that, I don't really know a lot about them. And then we have the final track, Don't Look Down. Is that down? Yeah, Don't Look Down. Well, that's the only way to look with this song. Just completely unmemorable song. I do like the riff that goes through it. There's a riff that goes through the center of the song. I like that. That's the only part of this song I really like. So, overall, it's probably a subpar album for me. Certainly won't help the image of this group in my mind. I've had, and it actually explains why I never got into them, because I've been listening to this band since the early to mid 80s. I started listening to them quite a bit, but mostly the tracks on the radio, and I didn't mind them. But I never went beyond that. At first I never really understood, why wouldn't you go on it? Like, if you like those tracks, why wouldn't you give the albums a chance? Because I had a feeling their albums were going to have that polished sound, and that the best songs you were going to hear were the ones that you're already listening to. So I never pursued it, and now I know pretty much why. I know I'm kind of crapping on this album a bit, but I'm a little bit disappointed. I had higher expectations of what I was going to hear here. Yes, there are some progressive elements. The keyboards are pretty good on this album. The guitars are good too. The individual instrumentation is not bad. I just think the album is very commercial sounding, produced, too clean sounding, and the tracks are completely unmemorable for the most part. I know that once I put this album away, I won't even remember a single track off of it in a month or so. It might not even be that long. So I'm sorry, this will be the first kind of shitter, I guess you would call it, for day 5. But that's what's going to happen when you're listening to albums for the first time. Maybe in this case, Saga is one of those groups that falls into that category of bands I knew but don't own anything from. So there's like 3-4 categories for those of you who have been following this or who haven't been following it. There's albums from bands that I've known very well and owned a lot of their stuff. There's bands who I've owned some of their stuff and have some familiarity with them. There's bands that I know of and have listened to some stuff but don't actually own anything by them. And then there's bands that I don't know anything about and have no knowledge of them at all. So they fall into the third category, which is bands I've heard stuff from, but I don't own anything from, and I really don't know a great deal about. And Saga falls into that. Maybe in Saga's favor too is that they're Canadian, and I tend to give Canadian bands a little bit more leeway than I do most other bands, just because they're Canadian. And maybe that's patriotism, I don't know, but yeah, I just maybe one of the other Saga albums would have been better in this slot, but again, I made it clear that I would disqualify any album for which there is something on there that I'm too familiar with, and there was something on the Silent Night album I was too familiar with. So I gave this album, because I wasn't familiar with any of it, a chance, and perhaps it's not a good choice, but the reviews of the album, or not the reviews, but the when I had to go look for an album, I had to look up to find one that fit, and there was a couple of things that suggested that this might be a decent album. So anyways, if you are a Saga fan, I apologize, but not all music is for everybody. Some people really like the things I've lambasted here, and that's great. It really is great. Like, everybody sees things differently, everybody hears something differently, everybody has a connection with something differently. It has to be that way. I can't have your connection with something because I'm not you. I have to have the connection that I have with it from my point of view. And from my point of view, this album just doesn't do anything for me. But I don't want to leave it as I think this is a crappy album. I don't think it's a crappy album. I think it's a it's a good album, but it's just not my taste in music. So I think it's probably put the torpedo in Saga for a while for me. But at the same time, that's what this is about: discovering something new and deciding whether it's something for you or not. And this is not for me, so I will move on to the next album, which will come out tomorrow on December 6th, day 6. And I hope that you like this video, and please subscribe, and we'll be back again tomorrow with yet another album, progressive rock album from the 1980s. Take care.